that's all my tackle loaded in my motor. Just making my way over to the Jedi's house. Right then, that's all of the tackle loaded into the van, and off to Crete Lakes we are going. After an absolutely chaotic first day at Crete Lakes, it's Saturday night. I've only had the rods out fishing for maybe about 2 hours all day. I know it sounds crazy, but I'll tell you all about that tomorrow. I am absolutely knackered. Sunday morning, 7:48 AM. After a good night's sleep, I'm feeling very fresh and ready to go. Unlike Bruffy, he didn't have a good night's sleep, but he did have a couple of carp through the night. Around about 1 AM, he had this mirror at £29. Just after daylight, he had this stunning common at £34. Well done, mate. That's a great start. As for me, just a few liners, but let me explain what happened yesterday. After a very chilly start to the day, what was all the fiasco about yesterday when we got here? Well, we arrived at the complex really early, about 7:45, but sadly, we had to wait outside till 8:30 till we could get in the gates. Yeah, did the draw went really well. Came out number 3. We had 5 people to pick in front of us, so really good draw. Very happy with how that went. What lake am I on? Well, I'm on Lake 3 in Peg 25. But back to yesterday, and it was probably about 12:30 by the time my tackle and Bruffy's tackle was loaded onto the trailer, so we kind of wasted a lot of hours. Then when I finally did walk around to Bed 25, to my amazement, there was a bivvy already set up and in it, and a guy just about cast his rods out, which was very confusing because I definitely picked Peg 25. There was nobody else on this lake when me and Bruffy picked it. Shout out to Paul, very nice guy, who was set up in this peg. We had to go back down to the lodge and figure out what went wrong. I knew what went wrong. It wasn't his swim. And like I say, Paul, no hard feelings, mate. These things happen. But yeah, after Paul broke his bivvy down again, I finally got set up. And by the time I got the rods out, yeah, it was about 3:30. I fished for maybe an hour and a bit, and then had to go down to tea. So not a lot got done yesterday at all. Anyway, I've decided to call this video Peche A La Carp. Very French. Back to basics is the subtitle. So in this video, what can you expect? We are going to go back to basics. The basics of carp fishing. How you find your spots, what rigs to use, and the approach I'm taking to this venue at the moment. So hopefully you can learn a little bit too, and I can put a few carp on the bank at the same time. I'm doing it this way just to show you that carp fishing in France doesn't really have to be overcomplicated. So keeping it simple, back to basics. This is Lake 3, Peg 25. The main reason I chose to fish Lake 3 was back in 2022, I had my new PB at £73 8 ounce, and I was well chuffed. So that's the main reason I chose to fish Lake 3. And it is a very nice looking lake with a very good stock of carp in. So yeah, that was the reason I chose Lake 3. So we've got open water in front of us. I'm not sure how deep it is because the water level is down about 1.5 feet, with it being October coming through the summer months. Yeah, the water does disappear often pretty fast. Lovely margin down the right hand side. I do love a margin to fish to. something I do try to look for. Majority of my fishing, to be fair, I'm not much of a fan of open water, but you know, sometimes that's what you've got. Just there is a lovely little bay that comes round and out. Now, I've spoke to a couple of lads who fish this peg before, and they tell me there's a massive hole there, and be careful of the sandbar because you will get cut off if you fish too far. To find the spots that we want to fish, we're going to have a good lead around with a marker rod and a marker float. 12-foot spod and marker rod. It's about a 4 to 5 pound test curve with a very buoyant float and a marker lead. The reel's loaded with 25 pound braided main line. The reason you use braided main line is there's no stretch in the braid and you get very good indication of what the lake bed feels like. So we're going to give this a few casts and hopefully we'll be able to find a few decent spots. Now, by decent spots, I'm personally looking for a hard gravelly spot that leads into a bit of silt. How do you know if you're fishing on gravel? Well, it goes donk, 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 donk when you drag it back. If you're fishing in silt, it comes through pretty smooth and you can usually see a few bubbles coming up as you're dragging it through the silt. Obviously, if you're fishing in weed, you'll feel quite a bit of resistance on the marker float, which tells you there's probably a low-lying weed or maybe 2 to 3 foot of weed. You never really can tell. It's all about the indication on the rod. So let's get this out and try find some decent spots. I've sped this up for you because 45 minutes of me throwing a marker float out trying to find a spot isn't exactly exciting to watch. I found a lovely spot down the right hand side margin, landed down with a donk, I pulled it back, yeah, little bit of gravel and low lying weed, so my right rod will be going there. My middle rod is on the fizzy bubblers where I saw them fizzing up when I got here, so middle rod on that. Made a few casts out into the open water at 19.5 wraps, found a lovely gravel spot leading onto a bit of silt, so that's where my left rod will be going. After finding the spots with the marker rod, what rig am I using? Well, I've gone in with the German rig on all 3 rods. Very versatile, can be used for pop-ups if you just put a little bit of putty on it, and can be used for a bottom bait, match the hatch, or a wafter. So very versatile. It's also very easy to tie. The one thing I should mention, due to the low lying weed, I am using a 10-inch hook link because when the boilie sinks down, I wouldn't want it all buried in that bit of weed. So yeah, using a longer hook link. The bait I'm using this week is mainline 18mm sal boilies, and I've coated them with a very generous amount of the Smart Sal liquid. 1 hour later, the rods are out and on the spots. 16.5 wraps for the right rod, fishing on gravel with a little bit of silt and low lying weed, so I've got a wafter on that one. The middle rod is fishing on the fizzy bubblers that I saw before I chose the peg. That's at about 10 wraps. Again, low lying weed, so got a pop up on that one. The left rod is fishing at 19.5 wraps, in line with the popular tree on the left hand side of your screen. It's a lovely little gravel spot with a little bit of low lying weed, so fishing a pop up on that one too. Anyway, that's the hard work done, spots found. I'm going to get the kettle on and make myself a brew. Just look at how that's fizzing there. I've got a rod, my middle rod is on that spot. When I was walking around yesterday before I picked this peg, that's what it looked like. and it just screamed, "Please cast a rod to me."
Very odd. 4:05, all them fizzy bubblers coming up and my middle rod not going off. I can't believe it. Anyway, I'm going to wind the rods in soon and go down the lodge to get some tea. I am very hungry as well. Really looking forward to it because it's a Sunday roast. Seen a few carp show out in open water and a couple of carp show just on the edge of the bay. So contemplating whether to move my margin rod further up towards that bay where I've seen the carp showing. Before it goes dark, I decided reel that rod in and cast it further up the margin into the bay area because I've seen another couple of carp show, so I think it's a bit silly to neglect that. Fingers crossed and something will happen through the night. Monday morning, yeah, nothing happened through the night. I had a bit of a restless sleep, to be fair. Temperatures did drop and I was tossing and turning a little bit. Not because I was cold, I just kept getting liners on the rods all night. So not a solid, sound night's sleep. But got the kettle on, got myself a brew, go for breakfast, and we will crack on with today. Carp number 3 for the Jedi, taken just before breakfast. A lovely mirror, weighing just over 30 pounds. Just gone 12 o'clock. I've decided to put my middle rod right up into the bay area where the hole is. Now, I'm taking an absolute massive risk that if I get a run, that sandbar is huge and I could get cut off. So, you know, if I do get a run, the rod tip's going to have to go straight up in the air, full arm's length at 12 o'clock and get to winding because, yeah, it is a massive risk I'm taking. But that's what I've decided to do because that's where I've seen the carp. It's 7:20. Not a lot happening, to be honest with you. The only thing I can say is the wind's pushing down into this corner and it has been a little bit warmer today. So yeah, we'll see what happens through the night. I've put a little bit of bait in. That's about all we can do. It's just about being patient now. And maybe one of those will go off. And after an absolutely epic fight, we have a stunning common. Whew, my nose is running now. First carp of the session, taken on the middle rod on a German rig that I showed you earlier with a white pop-up. And there we go, 39 pound bang on for a clonker of a common that is. Put up a proper good fight and I'm well chuffed to get the first carp on the bank. So yeah, taking on the German rig with the white pop-up. So yeah, back to basics. Proof is in the pudding that you can catch carp on simple rigs. Banging. Anyway, I think it's about time we get this one back and get the rod out on the spot because it is a good time for the carp be feeding. It's just coming up to 10 o'clock and it's actually not too cold tonight. Happy days. A very, very chilly 4:15 a.m. creepy red light moment. I cast the rod back out at 19 wraps towards the little bay I've had another run, and the inevitable's happened. It's taken me into a snag down the right hand side margin, and for the last 20-25 minutes I've just left the rod on the rest and it hasn't moved, and I already know at this point that the carp has definitely come off. So I'm going to leave the rod there. I'll deal with that in the morning, but I'm absolutely gutted. That was a second run for me, and it's been a really slow start to the week. So to lose that one, it's bone chilling. And so's this weather. Tuesday evening, just after tea. Even though the carp fishing's been slow, the days are melting by really fast. I can now see that the carp have moved out of the margin into open water on the back of this cold wind. So it's looking like I'm going to have to find some new spots. If the carp have moved out of the margins, it only makes sense to put the rods out in open water. It's now Wednesday afternoon. About an hour ago I decided to swap the rods around. I've got the right side rod still fishing in the little bay area, the hole, because that's where I had the first couple of runs from. But my middle rod and my left rod are now in open water. I left them on the spots through last night. You know, you've got to keep trying them spots for a bit, but I haven't seen any carp down the margins, mostly just showing out in front of me. It's been raining now for about the last 2 hours. Started off as just a bit of drizzle. It has gotten heavier though. Never a bad thing when you're carp fishing, because after a downpour, the carp might get their heads down for a good munch. And yes, I would love another run. So, you never know. It's about 7:10, Thursday morning. I am exhausted because I've been awake all night, feeding the swim little and often, listening to them boshing in open water. Can't seem to buy a bite for love nor money though. I'm gonna have a kip for an hour before breakfast. I can't believe my middle rod did not go off last night. 19 wraps is where it's at. The carp were boshing all over it, and I don't just mean for 10 minutes, all night. How did it not go off? Anyway, I've put my left rod at 19 wraps as well. Why is it just as you press record, one of them goes over? Had a quick catch up with Bruffy at breakfast. He tells me at 10 to 10 last night he had another at £32. That's carp number 4 for Bruffy. He is a very good angler. The carp are smashing out down the margin in his swim, so I'm expecting he will have a few more before the end of the week. Which he did. Gone just 1 o'clock that afternoon. Carp number 5, £42, the biggest out the trip for the Jedi so far. A few hours later, a common at £28. The carp are definitely down the margin, and he's doing a great job of picking them off. And it's been raining now for the last couple of hours, and I really haven't got anything to do. Little bit bored. Finally got myself carp number 2. Right rod, gone melting off. That's the rod with the mainline Sal Lofty on the German rig, producing this one at £29. So yeah, well chuffed to get carp number 2, because I thought it wasn't going to happen, but the carp are right on the very back of my swim. That's where they're lumping out. Chuffed. This fishing business can be a bit hard at times. Certainly a bit tricky in October. But there we go. Result. After popping the carp back, it did begin to rain really heavy. It's been raining now for quite some time. I think we're going to be in for a wet one today. While it's dry, here's some answers to some questions you might have. What rigs was Bruffy using? Well, he had a stiff hinge chod rig on all 3 rods
with a white pop-up. How much bait have I used? Well, just over 13 kilo spread over the 3 rods I've been using. How deep was the water I was fishing in? Well, it's been average depth between 6 and 8 foot of water. Sometimes I've gone down as deep as 9 foot. Why didn't I swap on 2 choddy rigs myself? Well, I've used German rigs before. Just adding a longer hook link does compensate for the low-lying weed. If the weed was any higher, obviously I would have gone in with a different rig or just found a different spot. Why didn't I move pegs? Well, there wasn't many pegs move into. Probably the last question you might be thinking is, when am I back out again? Well, I'm back out again in April, and I'm already looking forward to that one. With about 8 hours of fishing to go, I've still got the rods out, because yes, I do fish through the final Friday night. Particularly this week, the runs that I've had have been through the night, so yeah, seems like my run times are nighttime bites, so yeah, got me done. I set the alarm for about 5 o'clock this morning. I reeled in the right hand rod because it looked a bit strange, and yeah, I'd been done in the night and taken into the snag and the margin. Absolutely gutting. Ruffy lost another one through the early hours of the morning with 1 rod in the water while he was packing up. It went booming off, and he landed this one at 32 pound, the final carp of the trip. One thing you should take into consideration when you're coming out to any venue towards the end of the season, particularly in October, is that the weather is a lot different, the carp feed a lot different, and they are definitely not going to be climbing up the bank to get to you. What you've got to remember is there's been a lot of anglers out here throughout the season, and yeah, it's a lot of pressure, a real lot of pressure. Fish for 1 carp at a time would be my advice, and I'm happy to put a couple on the bank. Obviously we would all like more carp, but given it is October, I'm happy with the carp I've had. I'll see you next time.